Good afternoon and welcome to the first webinar in our new series for occupational therapists, Unleash Your Power, Why Students with TS and Related Disorders Need an OT. My name is Angela Sullivan, Medical Project Manager, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. This webinar is being provided as part of the Tourette Health and Education Program, a program of the Tourette Association of America in partnership with the CDC. During the webinar, we would be very happy to hear from you and include your voice in the conversation. You may ask questions or share comments using the question panel on the right side of your GoToWebinar player at any time. We will collect your questions and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. I would like to mention that funding for this webinar was made possible by our cooperative agreement with the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views expressed by speakers and moderators do not necessarily reflect the official policies of the Department of Health and Human Services, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial practices, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. The Academic Affairs Committee of the University of Alabama, Birmingham School of Health Professions has approved this program for 1 contact hour of continuing education credit. In order to claim your credit, at the end of the presentation, there will be a QR code you can scan with your phone to complete an evaluation. You will also receive a follow-up email once the webinar closes with a link to the survey if you have trouble accessing it via the QR code. Lastly, please take note of the handout section of the control panel. There you will find additional resources to download, which includes a copy of today's PowerPoint presentation and additional TAA toolkits. Before we get started, I want to briefly introduce our speaker this afternoon, Marjorie Henning. Marjorie has over 25 years of experience in pediatric OT, initially as an OTA and now as an OTR, after earning her BS/MS from the State University of New York at Buffalo. She conducts frequent in-services regarding the efficacy of OT for individuals with TS and related neurological conditions at local, state, regional, and national conferences, as well as for the Niagara Frontier District OT Association. She has been involved with transition services and has presented on programs for adolescents with dual diagnoses. Marjorie served as the chairman of the board of the TSA of Western New York and currently serves on the TAA's Education Advisory Board. Marjorie has 2 adult sons, a grandson, and several extended family members living with TS and related disorders. We do have 2 special guests, Dr. Jan Rao and Dr. Heather Simpson, who will be here to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Margie, go ahead with your presentation.
All right, thank you all for joining, and I'm looking forward to sharing my passion with working with our kids with Tourette syndrome. Obviously, we have a superpower. We're kind of like the Swiss Army knife of skills for kids with Tourette. So there's 3 tic disorders listed in the DSM-5, the persistent chronic or motor or vocal tic, and that's either a motor tic or a vocal tic, but not both, and that lasts for longer than a year. The provisional tic disorder is motor and or vocal tics that are present for less than a year, but they haven't met the criteria for Tourette syndrome or the persistent chronic motor or vocal tic. What we're going to be talking about today are the symptoms for Tourette syndrome, which is also known as Tourette disorder. So in order to be diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, you have to have 2 or more motor tics and at least 1 vocal or phonic tic, and it has to be present for longer than a year, but not necessarily occurring all at the same time. They have to wax and wane in frequency and occur before the age of 18, and they can't be contributed to another cause, a medical condition or substance abuse. So according to the CDC, they've given some statistics for occurrence of tic disorder. And 1 in every 100 school-aged children in the United States has been diagnosed with Tourette syndrome or another tic disorder. 1 in every 162 school-age children have Tourette syndrome. They also point out, though, that it's estimated that 50% of our students with Tourette are going undiagnosed, which, if you look at it that way, you could estimate that 1 in 80 children may possibly have Tourette syndrome, but they're either being undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, or mislabeled. And it's more prominent, 3 to 4 times more prominent in boys than in girls. So it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. It runs in families. It isn't rare. Motor and vocal tics are the sounds and movements that they're making. And it's really important to know that the symptoms vary from person to person. So if you come across somebody who says they've worked with a child with Tourette, they know a child with Tourette, they may feel that they know everything there is to know about Tourette, but what they really know is that one person with Tourette. Within families, the symptoms can vary significantly. Our son was diagnosed with Tourette, and a few years later, our other son was diagnosed with Tourette. Totally different symptoms, and I did not want to recognize the symptoms in the second child because I figured one kid with Tourette was plenty for one family. So the symptoms tend to emerge between 5 and 7 years of age. They increase as the kids start to age, and usually they tend to get worse during puberty. And it's important for people that you're working with, the families, everybody, and the student, to understand that they might get worse, but then they'll probably subside a little bit. So what families and the child with Tourette sees is how it started, how it is today, how it was, yesterday, and as it's increasing in severity, all they can see is down the road how much worse it's going to get. And that isn't always the case. It might get worse during puberty, but then it gets better. And some people are even able to say, our older son says he used to have Tourette, although I still hear some things, that he does now. That could be, Tourette-ish. So you have classifications of tics, and they're simple and more complex. So the simple motor tics are, eye blinking, eye rolling. It's usually, around the face, the head. The interesting thing, though, is a lot of these are things that you can't see, or you won't see. We had a little boy, and his mom finally understood when we started looking at these things. He would come home from school with his toes all bloody because he had a toe tic where he had to push his toes up against the top of his shoes. So they had to work out, some accommodations for that with bigger shoes and things like that. But a lot of times when you do that, it interrupts the tic. Complex motor tics can be, involved. They have to involve multiple muscle groups, and sometimes they look slower and more purposeful. Echopraxia and copropraxia are, echopraxia is mimicking other people's gestures or facial expressions, and copropraxia obviously is obscene gestures. Both of those things can get people into a lot of trouble. Kids with echopraxia, their friends think they're making fun of them. Teachers think they're being imitated. The one thing to keep in mind that they are masters of disguise, and they will incorporate something to disguise the tics that they may have. Our son had a tic where he would jerk his head, so then he incorporated a second tic with a smile that then turned into a grimace. But he made it look like he looked to the side to smile at the person next to him. Along with the phonic tics, you also have, simple and complex. And this, we're going to talk about the one, most popular one that gets bad press. But simple vocal tics, this is something that somebody else can hear. So it isn't, it's a whistling, a coughing, a humming, a tongue clicking. Our one son had a breathing tic where he would breathe real loud, and it would drive me crazy. And so I would tell him, if you're going to breathe, you got to go upstairs. I can't take it right now. Complex vocal tics are phrases that are, meaningful or not meaningful. Echolalia is where the person is repeating their own, repeating what other people are saying. And palealial is repeating their own words. We had a child who had, he had to repeat 3 things 3 times in 3 different ways. And his 3 things were fettuccine alfredo, Bob Vila, and Annette Funicello. And repeating what others say gets you in a lot of trouble in the classroom too, because it sounds like they're making fun of the teacher or their friends. Coprolalia is the one that gets all of the bad press. It is not necessary for a TS diagnosis, and it only is in 10 to 15% of the population that's diagnosed with Tourette that might have this thing where they have inappropriate language or racial slurs. And you can also see a difference in speech patterns as well. Due to the need for diagnosis, part of it is the tics have to wax and wane, and they change, they come and they go. And as we talked about earlier, they can get worse during adolescence, and they can go away for periods of time. Oftentimes when children are first diagnosed, the symptoms can subside a little bit right after the diagnosis, because the stress and anxiety of not knowing why they're doing these things, they finally have an answer, and it helps to calm them down a little bit. But it's important to understand that it's different from one kid to another, from one day to another, and we really, really, really do not support suppression as a strategy, because if they're suppressing tics, they're not concentrating or catching anything that they need to be learning, and it creates more tension. One thing to keep in mind too is that they do kind of suppress throughout the day naturally. When they get home, they really let loose. And so you will hear parents say their tics are much worse at home. Their behavior is horrible at home, much different from school. And a lot of times teachers think it's because the student has the parents wrapped around their little finger, or the parents are inadequate. So that's not the case. If they're seeing more problems at home than you are in school, they're right, and you need to help them with that. There's a lot of things that impact the frequency of Tourette, and it's not what is going on with us, it's what's going on with them. So, you might think, oh, Christmas is, months away, but they might start thinking about Christmas at Halloween. So, what triggers their excitement, their anxiety, are all things that you need to kind of be aware of and delve into and pull out of them, what's going on, and why are you, having difficulty right now. Fatigue, illness, hunger, and we've all worked with kids who maybe start displaying some strange behaviors in school. You know, they're just not on top of things, and then the next day you'll get the note that, oh yeah, they're sick, they're homesick. So that's the same with our kids, but worse. Obsessive compulsive disorder is a big problem for many of our kids. I don't know that I've worked with many that don't have some degree of obsessive compulsive disorder, and they will usually incorporate their tics into some obsessive compulsive component where it has to feel just right, it has to sound just right, the tic has to hurt enough. So completing simple tasks for them, these are unseen things that are going on in their head, but to sit down and write a simple paper is difficult for them. When we started early on learning about Tourette syndrome, the criteria is the vocal tics and the motor tics, and the duration. But the longer people studied Tourette and became more knowledgeable about it, there were all of these other co-occurring conditions that we were finding that people dealt with aside from or in addition to the tics. And those are the things that we're going to be focusing on today with their ability to control their anger and handwriting difficulties, attention deficit problems, obsessive compulsive. Those are all issues that impact their day-to-day activities. So this data shows that among the children that are diagnosed with Tourette, 86% have at least one additional developmental or behavioral mental disorder. And 63% with attention deficit hyperactivity. More than 1/3 of people with Tourette have obsessive compulsive disorder. You can see where the problems interact or kind of blend together for our kids. A lot of times I think of, when I look at this, I think of our students with Tourette as Sisyphus from the Greek mythology, where every day he had to push that rock up the hill. And not coincidentally, if you look in our kids' backpacks, it may be loaded with a ton of just in case things that that they need to haul around with them just in case they need them. But anyway, they got to get out of bed every day, and they've got to face that hill and lug all of these extra things up the hill with them while they try to do school and appear to be just another one of the kids. So what we're going to do right now is give you a chance to kind of understand a day in the life of a child with Tourette. And this was developed by, I have to give credit for this to Sue Connors, lives in Buffalo. She was a middle school teacher extraordinaire. You can't go anywhere in Buffalo without some child going, "Oh, Miss Connors, I had you in 6th grade." She taught French. She taught everybody about Tourette. She started the Tourette chapter support group in Buffalo, and she's the president of the Greater New York chapter. I don't know where our kids would be without Sue Connors, but anyway, this is her rendition of tick for a minute. So you're going to have a assignment that you're going to have to write the pledge to the flag, but you have Tourette, and imagine that you're in 5th grade, and this is going to go on the wall for open house, and everybody's going to see it, and you're sitting in classroom with a group of your peers. You have 90 minutes to write, 90 seconds to write the pledge to the flag, but don't start yet. You have one tic and one obsessive compulsive component. So your tic is with the hand that you write with. When I clap my hands, you're going to hit the top of your paper with your little finger. So I clap my hands, you hit the top of your paper with your little finger with the hand that you write with, no cheating and using the other hand. And every third word does not look right because you have obsessive compulsive disorder, and you need to cross it out completely, rewrite it, and then keep writing. Okay, so you're going to have 90 minutes, and I think we're ready. If there's people in the audience who might not be as familiar with the pledge to the flag, you could write your if you are from another country, you could write the your national anthem, if that is helpful to those that don't have what we, the pledge to the flag. Are you ready? Go. Remember, every third word doesn't look correct. Cross it out, start over. You're ticking with the little finger of the hand you're writing with. Oh, and by the way, when we get finished, you can get a snack from the cupboard, and then we'll all go outside for a recess. It's a nice day. Oh, remember, penmanship counts, as does punctuation and spelling. This is going on the wall in the hallway for open house. Parents are going to be looking at this. Every third word, make sure you cross that out. It does not look right. And if you could, put a nice big box around it to even it out a little bit. Okay, we're almost done. I see people are handing their papers in. Oh, nice job, Susie. Oh, you have such nice penmanship. Okay, we're almost done. All right, pencils down. So now, you didn't really have Tourette because you only had one tic and then the one compulsion. But how did you feel? And as an OT, think about how could you help a student who does this all day long, every day? Obviously, if you look at your written work right now, it's not your best work. It doesn't represent your knowledge of the Pledge of Allegiance. Your peers, would be laughing at you. The teacher would be asking you, why were you fooling around? Oh, you obviously don't care. Our kids hear things like, oh, you're just stupid, you're lazy. That they hear it a lot. And that is not representative of what our kids can do. So now as we go through this, you can think about how we can work with these students and give them the power that they need to get through their day and acquire their learning and show people what they know. I like this slide because it contrasts what we were just talking about. If you're looking at your normal run-of-the-mill students that just have some of these disorders, ADHD, depression, anxiety, and you contrast it with the percentage of our kids with Tourette who also have this disorder. The red bars being out of proportion for our kids with Tourette, and then just those run-of-the-mill kids. So this starts to give you a perspective on all of the difficulties that can be going on with our students, and including some of the chronic health conditions. And gosh, look at, when you think about the ticking, the bone and the joint and the muscle problems that our kids might encounter as a side effect of their tics, which some of the tics can be really injurious. So talking about the co-occurring conditions, a lot of times those are present before we have the onset of tics, or what we start to be able to observe. And many people that I've worked with, talked with over the years, it's the co-occurring conditions that create many more problems than the primary tic symptoms. And a lot of times kids will incorporate a couple of those things. So if they have a tic, then they add a sensory component to it and an OCD component to it, so that the tic has to feel just right, sound just right, be just enough. And the other thing that we see a lot with our kids is problems with executive function, which wasn't a part of the statistics, but what else is new? So when we look at from an occupational therapy point of view, and the OTPF for talking about how we're going to apply our expertise, and look at what is really impeding progress for our kids. It contrasts occupational analysis with activity analysis. And the activity analysis is understanding the specific situation that our client is trying to engage in. So the specific occupation the client wants or needs to do in the actual context in which the occupations are performed. And that's the piece that we really need to keep in mind when we're observing our Tourette students across their whole day in all of their environments. And we need to talk with, all of the people involved. This is where we start working on interprofessional collaboration too, because you need to talk with the teachers and the parents, the school nurse, the bus driver. Teachers' aides are huge resources. And it's really important to look at multiple work samples when you're looking at how is this child performing all of the tasks that they need to perform, because you might see a digression of skills as tics are waxing. As the students get older, sometimes looking at their job skills and driving skills will come into play as well. And then, so, you've done your observation, your occupational performance skills observation, and then you're going to do standardized evaluations, and then you work on their occupational profile, which is really important to take a look at what is it that they need to do all day, every day, the difference between a weekday and a weekend schedule, and make sure that you're looking at how are they interacting within the community, their family, their friends. Do they have friends? Who do they play with? Are they younger? Are they older? And an important piece is sleep and screen time. Sleep hygiene is a huge issue for our students. They can get really wound up and not able to turn off their head at night to go to sleep, and there's just a lot of issues. So figuring out how are they doing, and then what do we need to do to help them better handle everything that they need to do throughout the day. When I did a community I did a stint at a community mental health drop-in center. I interviewed a lot of the clients. It was all dual diagnosis kind of situation. Every one of them, and of course, you know, by and large, they were all male. There were, you know, it was like, you know, 3 to 4 more males than females. They all started having trouble in school in 4th or 5th grade. By middle school, it was horrible. They were having trouble, you know, getting the work done, doing the work. People were making fun of them. People told them, you know, all sorts of reasons why they weren't doing well. They would start hanging out with the wrong crowd. And by and large, every one of those people told me by 10th grade they dropped out of school. And that's what drives me to make people understand that we really have to shift gears. When we get to the higher grades, we have got to look at what is keeping them from accessing their learning materials and showing us what they know. We aren't going to be working on handwriting anymore. And many of our kids with Tourette Syndrome are qualify for IEPs or 504s. And it's what we call twice exceptional, or 2E, because they need the support in special ed services, but they also have some talent that they are exceptional at. And that is what we really need to develop and foster, because that's what gives those kids reasons to get out of bed every morning and show up and, you know, do the necessary drudge work in order to do what they enjoy doing and are good at. So when we work with our students with Tourette, it really, really needs to be that dynamic, fluid process, because of the change every day. And we have to identify what the outcomes are that we're looking for the student, as well as everyone else, the whole interprofessional team combined, and the family. What do we want, you know, for and with that child? So it's really important, and I think very cost effective and time effective when we sit down as a team and decide, not decide, but tease out what is it that's keeping this child from doing the things that they want and need to do. So obviously, you know, talking to all the stakeholders, talking to the parents and the school personnel, but you know, health is supported and maintained when clients are able to engage in homeschool, workplace, and community life. And it's the factors that disrupt that situation that we need to look at and help the child do what they want to do. It's interesting that they say that only clients can identify the occupations that give meaning to their lives, but you know, unfortunately for kids, there's all this stuff that they have to do every day, and they're expected to be good at it. Nowhere else in life do we have to be good at everything all day long, but our kids do. So how do we go about setting up a way for our kids to be, you know, get through the day and feel good about themselves? it's important too to remember that as OTs, we can come up with really good solutions for what the child needs to do, and it might sound good, but then it might not work for the child. So I've worked with students to figure out, what they need to do for a certain issue. But I always make it very clear that this is a fluid process, and we're going to look at it again in a day or two and see how it's going. And if it's not working, we're going to change it. We're going to see what we need to do. And it's not because they did anything wrong. It's because we didn't think of everything. And, now we know a little bit more and we can change our attack on this. But it's always putting that into their hands, as otherwise it's just something else that we've designed and we know it works really good in our head, and if it's not working, it's the kid's fault, and they don't need to hear any more negative stuff like that. So it has to be with their input. I included the role of the school nurse in this because I had done done a couple of in-services for school nurse associations and learned so much. But the one really interesting thing was that they're considered the health expert for the IEP and 504 teams, and it actually the guidelines for school nurses says that they're supposed to be a member of the IEP team. And I asked, so these were state associations, and I asked the school nurses, how many of you, sit on your IEP board? And less than half raised their hand. So it's an important piece of information for OTs to have, because we need to empower our school nurses too and bring them on board if they're not. The nice thing about, putting it in the realm of the school nurse is that it's the medical realm. So you can maintain the perception that Tourette is a neurological disorder rather than a behavior that can be controlled or corrected. So getting the school nurse as a part of your interprofessional team that's working with this student with Tourette is huge. So adaptations to the school environment. It's I hesitate because it's like many of us have heard now, with sensory integration things, right? You provide a little bit of this or a little bit of that, and then, oh, that's what everybody needs, right? And so put everybody on a therapy ball, put a weighted vest on everybody, give everybody fidgets. If you don't know what it is that the specific child needs or doesn't need, making these blanket statements is not going to help. So I've listed these things that will help, a student. But what I want to do is highlight what I did with one particular student and kind of cover all of these things. So I had a boy in 4th grade, and he was referred for occupational therapy because his behavior had gotten really bad. He had just been diagnosed with Tourette. His behavior was so bad that they were considering an alternative placement out of the school district. And he was scaring the kids in his classroom. Parents were complaining. And obviously we needed to do something for this little guy. At the time I was a COTA, so my OTR had been at the meeting and then came to me and said we need to work with this little guy. So what I did with him was, you know, and I'm thinking, well, this kid he was throwing desks. So it's like, what am I going to do with the kid that's throwing desks? We walked and we talked. First we walked, we didn't talk. Then we walked and we talked. And what he came up with was he needed to get out of the room. He was embarrassed, humiliated, and kids were afraid of him. They didn't want to be his friend. So long and short, he wanted to be able to, he found that the library was a place that made him feel comfortable. So we talked to the librarian and she was fine. So what we worked out with the teacher was when he gave the teacher the signal that he made up, he would pull on his ear. And that meant he was going for a walk and he was going to get a drink of water. He was going to the library. And then when he was ready to return, he would come back to class. She would, in turn, when he signaled her, she would signal him so that they both understood what was going on. And that worked well for him. And I emailed the whole school because by then, of course, you know, the word was out about this guy, so that everybody knew that this was what he was doing. If they saw him in the hall, he was fine, and it worked really well. In 5th grade, he had a teacher that she was new to the building, and when I talked to her about him and reviewed what he needed, her first reaction was, I can't have him getting up and leaving the classroom. He's going to miss instruction. And I pointed out to her that he could stay in the classroom, but because of his need to get up and move, he wasn't going to be hearing anything that she was teaching. And most likely the rest of the class wasn't going to learn anything either. And yep, she learned that. She found out that, you know, letting him leave, she could keep teaching the class. Nobody missed instruction. You know, he was able to catch up when he came back, but it made his life easier. When we moved on to middle school, he talked to the principal. He introduced himself so that she knew him not as a problem. And, you know, they talked about things that they enjoyed, similar interests. His safe place at the middle school was his guidance counselor's office. She had a great rapport with him, and he went to her office whenever he needed a break throughout the day. And she had a rocking chair in there, and he liked to rock in that rocking chair and bang it against the wall, which was fine. But later on, the guidance counselor's secretary told me, boy, every time I saw him coming through the room, I just cringed because her office backed up to that wall. So she would get a little headbanging going on there. But the thing was that we worked with him to do what he needed to do and then to be able to go back to the classroom. So when we talk about you know, how do we adapt our environment? That's a lot of, you know, what you do for them, and putting them in charge of taking care of themselves. At first I started, you know, also I talk about us being a barometer for the younger kids when they're starting out, because we need to try to read them and catch them before they need the break, so that we can start to, you know, generate, you know, it looks like this is getting a little bit frustrating. Why don't we go for a walk? the last thing you want is also when you develop some strategy for the child, for the teacher to be yelling, you know, you need to take a break, you need to get up and leave the room right now, you need to do your thing to calm down. You want to instill this power with the child, where with like the teacher, you know, if she saw that he needed a break, she would pull on his ear and he would say, okay, I'm out of here. So helping the child to understand and label the different emotions and frustrations they're going through is helpful. So, you know, empowering them, assessing executive functioning skills is, I would say, paramount with our kids with Tourette. I really, really like Dawson and Guar's book, Executive Function Skills for Children and Adolescents. What I found about the book is that there is questions, forms in there. And when you open up that book, and this is for all of the kids that you work with, when you open that book and you start reading from a printed page, something that's been printed, this isn't something that you're just making up because you see this one person having a hard time with it. This is something that's in a book that other people have trouble with. And Dawson and Guar, you can very easily, you see where the weaknesses in their executive function are, and you see what their strengths are. And it's really easy to capitalize on their strengths to pull up their weaknesses. And I meet with the kids and we look at the little checklists and stuff, and you can say, look, you know, you're really good at doing this and this and this, and you're having trouble doing this, so why don't we try this? It makes them feel more in control. The most important thing I want to say about accommodations is what I found: extended time on tests, an alternate location, and I can't emphasize enough, not with other students, because the very nature of Tourette syndrome is they need to move and make noise. And so pretty much, you know, in the school system, if you have alternate test site and extended time on tests on your IEP, everyone that needs that goes trooping down to the special ed room, and they sit in a smaller group to take the test. That does not work for our kids with Tourette syndrome. They need to be alone without other students so that they don't have to worry about disturbing other people. And the important thing to understand too is that with extended time, if you give them extended time on tests, they might not need it because you've eliminated the stress of having to finish and the OCD that kicks in and all of that nonsense. But if they don't have extended time, they'll never finish the test. And that's something that, you know, schools, teachers and administrators will fall into. Well, we give him extended time and he doesn't use it. Just let it go. There's a lot of assistive technology out there, but a couple of things that I really, really wanted to point out is the Echo Smart Pen, which for our kids with Tourette, this was invented, if you don't know, it was invented by a businessman who wanted to be able to record business meetings and take notes, but he wasn't able to catch everything. So this is actually a digital recorder and a pen that uses special paper. And there's a little camera behind the pen point. So as you're writing on this special paper, the camera is taking a picture of where you are on the paper while the digital recording is going on. So when you go back, regardless of what you've written on the paper, it will play what was being said. So for students with dysgraphia, dyslexia, anxiety, OCD, attention deficit, they can use this device and get all of the information to listen to later. They can, if they're more kinesthetic learners, they can doodle, make drawings, whatever it is that they need to do to stay focused, and they don't have to worry about getting word for word everything down because it's been recorded. It then can be downloaded onto the computer. It shows up on the screen. You can listen to the digital recording again and fill in any notes that you need to fill in, or make up things that you can then study from. They can also listen to this as they're doing something else, like exercising, riding a bicycle, using a treadmill, because sometimes just listening to recordings while they're doing something else is really more beneficial. In addition to all those other things that are listed, the steno mask people have found to be really useful because it can, for really loud tics, vocal tics, it can mask the noise, and you can sit in lecture halls or wherever and not disturb other people. And then the senescent audio note taker is a really robust program. It's suited more for older students, but it works really well for college students as well, because you can download the PowerPoints, and then it records bars of audio. It's great for kinesthetic learners and people that can't get everything down. And the beauty of that, and then read and write from text help, both of those programs can be downloaded for free 30-day trials, which the parents can experiment with. The other thing I want to say about the steno mask, talking about the steno mask, for kids that have loud vocal tics. We had a student that was returning to school after he had been home for quite a while because of a really loud vocal tic. When I talked to the parent on the phone, it really did sound like they had a couple of parrots in the house. But after he'd been out of school for a while, and he was in, I think, 3rd or 4th grade, I went back to the classroom his first time back to kind of see how it was going to go. And I watched him from the time he got there, and I sat through a couple classes. And what I started doing was making a little tick mark, a little mark on the paper every time that he made this noise. And I also started making a mark on the paper every time there was another noise in the classroom. Somebody sneezing, somebody dropping a book, the classroom phone ringing, an announcement over the speaker. There was a classroom that was lined up outside and the teacher was talking to them. So there were all of these day-to-day random noises going on in the classroom, and his tic did not add up to all of the other noises that went on. So it's a good way, and the thing is, once you educate the classroom and then the people around the student, they become accustomed to it, and it becomes a part of that background noise that they don't react to. The tics become more like somebody dropping their book, or teacher talking out in the hallway. It just is. Hopefully it'll become more like wallpaper for the classroom. So Natalie at the office wrote this, and it is so beautiful. And I think if you could take this with you, you know, it affects all races, ethnicities, genders, and ages. And keep in mind that, you know, there's the disparity between our rural population and, you know, healthcare providers, so that many of our students aren't getting, they're being misdiagnosed because they're, you know, in the wrong place at the wrong time. So we really do hope that we can increase education and awareness and enhance the knowledge of the Tourette diagnosis. And we are getting so much better at what is best practice, and we're learning from each other and developing things and looking at, you know, treatment outcomes. So TS isn't as bad as it, I think it was in my head when my son was diagnosed a long time ago. And there are a lot of, I guess you could say, positives for kids with Tourette. They hopefully are resilient. And I think if we act like we can figure out a way around these things and help them to be advocates for themselves, rather than looking at them like they're broken and they need to be fixed. Look at them like, you can do this, you can figure this out. Yep, this is tough. And the other thing is, for our family, we have a warped sense of humor, but having a respectable sense of humor helps in a lot of these situations. And if I could recommend one other thing to you, and I forgot to put it in the things, is a book by Sue Connors, the Tourette Checklist. So I am going to sign off. I'm done, and now we'll do questions.
Thanks so much, Margie. So as she said, we are going to answer some of the questions that were submitted during the presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit some questions through the questions pane in your control panel. If we're unable to get to everyone's questions here at the TAA, we do have a full-time information referral staff who can answer your questions as well by emailing support@tourette.org or by calling 1-888-4-Tourette. Hey, Margie, you want to just pull up the last slide for me?
Oh boy, the last one. Wait a minute. Oh, are we? Sorry.
Okay. The one with the QR code.
Oh yeah.
So just as a reminder, everybody, once this slide is up, feel free to open your phone camera. Once it scans over the QR code, a link will pop up, and this is how you will access the survey to claim your credit. So just take the questions. It shouldn't take you very long. Make sure you fill in your contact information, and then we will send you a certificate. So let me check out what kind of questions we have. So one question we have, Margie, Jan and Heather, feel free to chime in. Do you think it's possible that sometimes sensory issues may be misunderstood to be physical tics instead?
Jan or Heather, you got it?
Yeah, this is Jan Rao. I do think that sometimes sensory issues are misinterpreted as tics. Now, having said that, understand that there is a fairly significant sensory component to tics. So they, while the child may in fact be ticking, they are typically responding to the sensory stimulus or the sensory impact of that tic. So as occupational therapists, it is sometimes, especially if you don't have a lot of experience working with kids with tic disorders, it is hard sometimes to tease out what is strict sensory and what is a tic. So I'll leave it there since we're short on time.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I was just going to tag on that. As Jan said, oftentimes the sensory hypersensitivity will mimic the urge of tics, like Jan mentioned. So, and so oftentimes, you know, a sensory urge and like a neck, like a tag, will trigger a head tic. So they might be two separate components, but the sensory component of the tics will also be prevalent. So it can be, there's a sensory phenomenon for the tics, but sensory is related to tics as well. So it's difficult to tease out the two, but understanding that they're both very connected is important.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll take just one or two more questions. Marjorie, would you mind sharing what executive functioning measure do you use?
Most recently, I've used the Dawson and Guar checklist. That's what I've been using. Jan and Heather, what do you use?
That Dawson and Guar checklist is a real easy one. I have used, I don't often look at executive functioning very often, but I know I will pull up the ones that they do. Jan, you might jump on that one.
Yeah, I was looking for, I'm in my other room right now and I don't have my resources. I'm not being able to pull it right out of the top of my head.
We can get back to you. Yeah.
Angela, if we can send you, because I do have some go-to resources, I just can't think of them.
Yes.
You can just send those to you and you send them out or post it someplace.
Absolutely. I will send a follow-up email to everybody on the webinar with these additional resources. I do want to address the QR code is not working, so apologies for that. You will receive a link to the survey after in the follow-up email. So don't worry, you will be able to complete the evaluation and claim your credits. So no stress. Okay, we'll take one more question. Let's see. Do you find a sensory approach helps with tics? Example, fidgets for fingers, finger tics, gum for vocal or sounds from mouth, deep pressure, etc.
It does, but you have to really look at what is the tic and what is the purpose of the tic. If they need to be, humming or something, giving them gum might not be so good. So I would say, some of that I would fall more into the CBIT category.
I'll jump on that. There is no evidence supporting sensory and tic management. That being said, anecdotally, sometimes it can help and distraction. But the only evidence-based way to treat tics is through comprehensive behavioral intervention for tics. So anecdotally, I will use a fidget on occasion, but the only true way to manage tics is through CBIT. Is my thought for OTs. Jan, you want to jump on that?
Yeah, I would just echo that 1,000 times. All of us doing this started off using a sensory approach because that's really all we knew until 2010 when CBIT was first published. And since the beginning of CBIT, it's so highly effective. You don't need any other props. You just need the person's own body to teach them the strategies and how to come up with a competing response to basically interrupt the tic or make the tic impossible to happen. So it's the gold standard for treatment. If you're interested in getting CBIT trained, we can help you with that too. But the sensory, just as Heather said, not only is there no literature supporting it, but for those of us that did it for years before, because we didn't have anything else, it really doesn't work. It's very, very slow. Kids usually get extremely frustrated with the sensory intervention and don't necessarily like it.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all so much, Marjorie, especially for a wonderful presentation. This is all the time that we have for our webinar. Once the webinar is closed, you will receive a pop-up survey, which is more just a feedback survey on the particular your experience during this session. It is just for the TAA to learn a little bit more about your experience. It has nothing to do with claiming credit. So I know it's a little bit of a burden, but we really appreciate any feedback that you do have. And as I mentioned earlier, you will receive a follow-up email that has more information on the claiming credit and the link to do that evaluation. So thank you in advance for all your feedback. Thank you so much for attending. The webinar will be posted also on the TAA's YouTube channel for those who are unable to participate today. We encourage you to reach out to us about this webinar or for other ideas and suggestions that you may have. Stay tuned. In 2 weeks, we're having the second webinar in this series, so definitely please register for that in advance. And on behalf of the Tourette Association, thank you again for joining us this afternoon and taking the time to view our presentation. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your day.